Welcome to our sermon for the Church of Witchcraft. My name is Andrews. I'm the Hierophant of the church. Mostly just keep things on the rails. I really want that bingo card that one of our members was talking about of the repetitious things that I say. I feel like that would be a really funny game to play about the silly aphorisms that I have. Either way, I practice witchcraft. I've been doing this for a lot of years, and I've been talking out into the void for also many years. Some of you have listened, other people have commented, and we always appreciate those things as well. Primarily, I work with celestial stuff, but really I do more with portals, thresholds, and gateways in my witchcraft, as well as the whole admin side of the church, too. There will be some changes in sermon format due to the upcoming changes in my life as well as Gwen's, because we are expecting, and they are to be here at the end of February, which is great so that she can actually get some sleep, kind of. But also that means that we have to be very judicious of our time. I will still be here, I'll still be around, but sermons are going to shorten down. We're going to go to 30 minutes instead of the hour that we normally, because also it's probably easier for you guys to listen to instead of me wandering off on topics for an hour. We can deep dive at a later date. So just know that it's going to be a little more focused on that. I'm also going to look more at essentially a liturgic calendar for witchcraft. It's going to be predicated mostly on equinoxes, solstices, that kind of thing. And these will sort of map to, our sermons will map to that as well. So that will be kind of a good binding element because I've been doing this for a number of years. And I think it would be good to have some of that kind of concrete, what do we talk about each year, that sort of stuff. And so specifically, that's why we're talking about this now. And this is one of the things we're going to be talking about is navigation magic. And I think it's really important to talk about that, about what witchcraft means for us in our lives as we begin a new year. The liturgical calendar, by the way, I should have that available by the end of January. It'll be on our website stuff, and I'll put that together. So look for that. It's not there now, but it will get there. So the main question that I want to focus on for tonight is how do we use witchcraft to navigate a new year for us? The first part of that is that magic is a navigational tool. It's not about force. There are a lot of really big misconceptions within witchcraft, and a really big one is that people think that witchcraft is about making reality yield to your will instead of partnering with it. And this is a story of domination. It is so rooted in colonizer mentality as well as patriarchy, two of the big things that we also want to stray away from in witchcraft is about our own evolution as people and humans, as well as this blurry camera that's trying to come into its own so very hard. But this domination that's in our lives is not one that we want to be a part of. It's why the Church of Witchcraft specifically doesn't have dogma, incontrovertible truth about things or whatnot. We'll give you things to consider. We have things that we believe, the doctrine. But again, we don't want to get into that idea that we are dominating our worlds. Magic is alignment. It isn't about domination, in our opinion specifically. Would you make magic about domination? Probably, but I think you'd have some less than great results, and you'd probably delve more into that kind of negative, baneful scope of things, and you start getting into a really unethical framework as well. Our ancestors didn't command the seasons. They listened to them. They watched what was going on around them. Our ancestors also didn't try to force the tides. They sailed with them. Navigation magic is the art of reading. It is the idea about your internal compass. It's about our external signs, the portents and omens that we indicate and see, just like I kind of talked about in the eyes, heart, and hand of a witch, which I really need to go back and do that because I also reference that one very frequently. And that's all of our sermons are on our YouTube channel too. And this navigation magic is not just about the art of reading with the outer signs as well as our own internal compass, but it's about the subtle shifts in magic or energy, if you will. I don't know if I want to make that distinction exactly, but some people reference their magic or craft as energy. It's also about your timing, about whether you're going to be at action or if you're going to be at rest. And this is part of our navigation. As witches, we ask not, how do I make my year what I want? Instead, we ask, where is the current flowing And how do I step into that with wisdom? That's the biggest part of our navigation that we want to do in our year and ongoing. In terms of time, we know that time isn't a linear concept. We've had plenty of situations, I'm sure that many of you had situations in the past about various things that you've heard about the future or that you've divined or you've gotten interesting information about. Think about oneiromancy or somnergy, sleep magic, dream magics, that kind of a thing. That's nonlinear. Anything can happen in those kinds of spaces, these liminal spaces that we partner with. Our past informs our present. The present seeds our future, and the future whispers back to us now. And that is how we understand how we're connecting with our world. And that really relates to our navigation as well. At the precipice of a new year, we're not starting from zero, not just a clean slate. It is also something that we start and we arrive with certain skills as well. We start with lessons that have been learned, patterns that have been revealed, as well as wounds that are partially healed that we're all still working on, as well as strength that is newly discovered, things that you might have gained within that last year as you start. Navigation begins with our recognition. Before we move forward, we need to look backwards. And it's not with regret that we're going to look backwards. It's about looking forward, looking backwards with that clarity. The things that you learned from what already happened has already passed. And instead of regretting the things and the choices that you made, you stepped into that with that wisdom and awareness and that clarity. You can ask yourself, what cycles were repeated last year? Where did I grow as a witch, as a person, in my families? What themes have returned for me too? Because we see these a lot. Like when you do tarot card readings and that sort of thing, you'll see the same card pop up over and over, and the same story keeps getting repeated. Those are the kinds of themes that we want to look at in our own year. Also, it's where did we also drain? What took things away from us? Because that's going to feed into the themes that we have that are repeating. It goes back into the cycles that keep happening. Because if we're not aware of those things, we're not looking back and assessing these, we're going to have some challenges moving forward. We'll get stagnant and kind of stay in the same place. Magic specifically becomes dangerous when you're ignoring truth, specifically ignoring truth. But magic becomes potent when truth is honored as well as recognized. And I have to say it this way, partly because of the last sermon, which was about truth and deception and how those things connected. There's a place and time for truth. There's a place and time for deception. But knowing when to honor truth and when to recognize it is really important because it's also something that you would need to know for other people. If you're doing any sort of divination for other people, is it something that they need to know? Is it theirs to know? Is it yours to even reveal to them? And that becomes a really big question for a lot of people. And this kind of ties into the sacred art of foresight. Foresight comes not as a prediction, but as attunement in our own lives. We're looking with these tools that we have, the occult technologies, and we're tuning and aligning ourselves in that way. Things like divination, self-reflection, like meditation, those kinds of things. Journaling is one of them. We see this a lot in shadow work or the popularized shadow work. Scrying as well as dream work, all of those pieces of divination, they don't foretell our fates. It doesn't set things in stone and etch them in forever. Some say they might actually have some debates, and I would love to have that because I would be really interested to see how people think a concrete fate interplays with what I'm saying, and that would be a really fascinating discussion. But this foresight doesn't foretell our fates in general. It illuminates our deeper patterns that we're seeing. So thinking back to what I just said about what we're looking at in our past year, looking back with that clarity, this is about looking at those deeper patterns that we have. We pause when we embrace our foresight. And it's the time that we can ask, what am I preparing for? What might I intend to release? How might I expand myself rather than contract, right? Stepping into those places where I'm really getting into that wisdom part of how I'm going to move forward and how I want to enact my next year coming up. Even brief foresight. We're not talking these huge revelatory kind of things. A single image, single word, or even an intention can create a magical anchor for you. Just that alone is going to be a potent piece of magic for any witch. When we pause and align ourselves, it signals to the universe that we are conscious and that we are participating. That participation and that partnership is really important to witchcraft. Consciousness is a doorway that manifestation enters. When we're aware and awake and doing the things that are paying attention to and stepping into things and partnering with them, that's when our manifestation is going to be at its peak. And that's part of our navigational magic. Planning is also just covert spellcraft. So if you hate planning, you don't actually hate planning. Just reframe it as, I'm doing spellcraft, because it basically is. When I say to you, planning is not unmagical. So let it be magical. You can bring, when people ask, how do we put witchcraft more into our lives? This is one of the ways that you can do this. Planning is a structured intention. Magic, it also gives us a magical direction of some kind. And it's also a spell that is drafted in the daylight. Although I think that you can probably draft spells of any iteration in the daylight, but you do you, boo. It's okay. Witches who refuse all planning aren't necessarily more intuitive. Often they are merely reacting to their situation. They aren't guided by the eyes, heart, and hand of a witch, right? What we see, what we feel, what we can touch. Those kinds of observations are really important as we attune ourselves with our year and our lives and the paths that we have. Our navigation magic specifically educates us in ways to select our direction, prepare our tools for work, just like you see all the tools here and everywhere else that you probably have at your altar as well. And also when you should walk forward and when you might want to sit down. Sitting down is not a bad thing. In fact, I like to do it a lot, probably more than I should. Nothing really needs to be complex in this. It isn't required to be complex. It isn't needed or necessary to be complex. Simply being clear and present with what you're doing is enough. Plans can be simple, such as this year I protect my magic, deepen my craft, be more aware. Those are basic, simple plans that you can do. One of my professors in my undergrad said, name it to tame it. I'm sure she picked that up from somewhere. But when our intentions are named, magic has a route, a road to travel now. If we have no idea what it is we're doing, how can we go anywhere with that? When you are aligned, manifestation can occur. Consciousness is that doorway that a manifestation can enter. Witches who manifest aren't merely thinking wishfully. You are not just bypassing what you're trying to do or bypassing aspects of your own life. It's not about your forced creation. It's more about what you're learning to develop for yourself and attuning yourself and aligning. Manifestation can occur if you have, if your desire aligns with your creativity. So knowing what I want to make, where I want to go. When your attention aligns with your action. So if I'm doing a whole bunch of, if I want a certain thing, but my actions don't match that, really hard to get to that place that I want to be. Timing needs to align with readiness. So this kind of goes back to that truth and deception conversation that I had. Some people just, it's not the right time. Sometimes you're not ready for a certain aspect in your life to be revealed to you. One of the possible risks of doing divination is getting information that you either A, don't understand, or B, aren't ready for, or C, don't have the equipment to deal with. But we step into that boldly. That's part of the liminal work that witches do. And this also brings up the idea of witchcraft ethics too. Proper witchcraft ethics demands that every spell carries responsibility. All of your divination carries a responsibility and a weight. For example, if a witch calls forth abundance, for one example, but then won't change their relationship to scarcity, the spell can't really go anywhere. If you're just gonna, that is where we're gonna start seeing the wishful thinking when our intention doesn't align with our action. Another example is if you call for transformation, but continue to cling to old identities and old patterns and the old themes. That's that part of clarity in our year that we want to have when we're looking back, not without regret. Because if you are if you're calling for that transformation and you're clinging to those old identities, you're essentially deceiving yourself and you're deceiving also the universe that you're trying to work with, the magic that you're trying to do. It's not your true intention. It's okay if it's not, but it's about being aware of that. I often mention that people, when I'm teaching how to do divination of some kind, you're asking an underlying question. You're trying to find the question underneath your querent's question. Sounds a little weird, but basically people will ask you all sorts of stuff. They're not really asking that. There's something underneath that, and that interpretation is something that the readers do. Solid core readers can do those kinds of things. Don't always get it right. Again, foretelling is not prediction. Navigation magic asks, who must I become to walk the path I want to be at? Manifestation follows embodiment. In ethical witchcraft, we talked about the witch's compass. And that's that internal compass when we're looking at what it is that we're going to do, where we're going to go, and matching our intention and our action together. Every witch has this inner compass, be it conscience or spirit or demons, if you will, a higher self even. It comes by a lot of different names, but that internal compass is one that guides us all. Navigation magic uses this to function. We don't have some sort of alignment that we want to go for, and we don't have something that tells us what we want. We're not really going to be able to navigate anywhere. We're just sitting there doing nothing. But before we act on any of these things, we have to ask ourselves, does this align with our values? Does this honor our consent, mine as well as others? Does this also bring balance, or does it create a debt? And I like that specific phrasing. What debt are we incurring? Not all debt is, and nothing necessarily that I'm saying is either good or bad. It just is more of a discussion, exploration, right? A debt is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes there will be a debt, and that's an okay thing. It's just about how we're managing that and how we're balancing these things out. Ethical witchcraft is a sustainable practice. A year without integrity as a guide may bring results, but it's going to come at a cost, especially if we're not aware of what we're doing or why we're doing it or who we're doing it for or with or any of those factors. Navigating with integrity may be slower, but it is magic that will endure in our lives. Sometimes our roads get a little mixed up and they get a little difficult to understand or to see, much like the camera once again. When we have those challenges with what it is that we're going to be doing and navigating those aspects, sometimes you have to course correct. Just because you set an intention doesn't mean that it's going to have a million unknown factors that could influence what's going to happen. Course correction isn't a failure. Course correction is just a part of what you're doing. And it's something that we understand, much like I don't generally aim for dualities. I think about polarity, that things are on a scale. What's good and bad, and then how those things relate to one another. Even the most seasoned witches have to recalibrate to what they're doing. I do it literally all the time. Sometimes spells aren't going to work. Divination isn't giving the messages that I want. And it's looking back at what I'm checking in with myself as to why those things aren't yielding the interaction that I am striving for. Stars shift, circumstances change, and we change. If we didn't, I'm not sure. I had this whole conversation today too in class that it had to do with, is change, is a good a static thing? What is all good? Or is good something that's dynamic? I tend to think it's dynamic, but this kind of begs the question here too, is that if we're changing, the stars are changing, then everything is going to be in this kind of state of constant flux. And it's that flux that witches are working within. Adjustments in your magical navigation is wisdom. Again, it's not a failure. Spells evolve and intentions mature, and also our paths diverge. I saw an interesting reel online that was about a 5-year rule. Not necessarily accurate for everybody, and it's definitely not consistent across everybody, but a 5-year rule that you will sometimes, the people that you know right now in 5 years, you may not know, or your paths will diverge, or things will change, or different goals, right? Quinn and I ended up in Nebraska. Our goals and targets changed, right? That was only 3 years ago. In 5 years, those people are going to be on their own path doing their own thing, right? There may be some connection still, but there's still some of those change. And it's just something to be aware of and mind versus being concerned or fearful of it. We want to build a space in 2026. Yes, I'm going to date this. And we want to build a space for reflection at the full moons, recalibration at dark moons. Order this how you need to, depending on how your understanding and faith works. Think about making space for seasonal reassessment at the equinox, the solstice. How are those things going to change our intention? Or do they? And also make space for honest self check-in. What is it about yourself, where you're at, what you're doing? Set small targets, right? If it's too big, you aren't going to manage it and it's just going to fall apart. Make smaller goals, right? And I'm sure we've all heard this and we're going to hear this all over again, but making sure that we do those check-ins, right? I do that on a consistent basis because I'm not going to get everything right and I don't have predictions. I have a good probability map of things that are probably going to happen, but I can't, none of those are guarantees. They're probabilities. Magic that cannot adapt will stagnate, but magic that can adapt will thrive, just like ethical witchcraft will endure over time. This is a part about trusting seeing the unseen when walking the scene. I know that sounded really complicated, but basically, you need to trust in all of your intuition about what's going on, even when you're busy dealing with this kind of low level physical kind of junk that we have to deal with all the time, right? How do we trust that our witchcraft is doing what we want it to do? How do we trust these intentions, this manifestation in our own selves? There will be times where omens and signs feel kind of quiet or that they have separated, you're not really checking in on those and you're not feeling them. It's where intuition is muted or a path is now no longer open to us and it's just closed. This isn't necessarily stagnation. It is an incubation, a time when we're disconnected from these aspects of our witchcraft is a time that we can rest and reflect. In my practice every year, there's a time where I have simpler practice versus more complicated practice. And more complicated practice involves ritual and ceremony and behaviors and patterns and tools and materials. But there's also a time that's separate, that's just about me, the practitioner, engaging with the universe in magic in that of itself, without all of the accoutrement that you see here or over here. These things are good extensions, but not something we want to rely on. Specifically, I don't want to rely on it. You may want to rely on tools, but that requires a lot of different skill sets, right? To cleanse and consecrate and charge them, I have to put them somewhere, I have to store them, they get sacred. What do you do with them when you die? Like, there's just so much that goes into them. They're good to have, but not always relying on those is going to be helpful. In the first part of the year, this part of the year specifically, I go into more of a reduced phase where I'm not as effective in witchcraft. And because of that, I don't try to force spells and divination. I'm a lot more quiet in this point, and that's about the restoration from the busy part of the latter half of the year, because I work more with the chthonic elements and the darker times of the year, and this is just not my time, at least because I'm in the northern hemisphere. But that's not a problem. That's just the time that I get to reflect on what all of the activity just happened, and it gives me this good balance between that. So again, it's not about stagnation, it's about that incubation, what we're learning from that time. Witches know that seeds grow in the darkness, that silence is power, and not all movement can be seen. I mean, I can't see molecules moving around, can you? I haven't seen them. I mean, I can look at an electron microscope maybe, and that'll work. But navigation magic reminds us that to trust ourselves on this, to trust what we can't see, to trust in that liminal space that we are. And we have to trust that as much as we're trusting the path that we're setting forth for ourselves. Sometimes the most potent spell is patience. The bravest is about being as in waiting in that of yourself. And the wisest navigation is in stillness. In sailing, you'll sometimes encounter the doldrums. And at that point, you're just kind of sitting around. There's no wind, there's no currents going on, you're just stuck. Good time to probably take stock of your ship and make sure everything's in tip-top shape because you're not going anywhere. You got to wait for the wind to pick up and take your boat along with you out of the doldrums, right? And that's not a problem. It's just a time to reflect on where you're at that point. In closing, here at this year's beginning, know that you aren't lost and that you are able to manifest what you want in your own life. You're not powerless in this. You're working with the magic forces that we're part of. And that is a potent place for us all to be in. You are a navigator of magic, a reader of currents, and you're also somebody who's going to be a co-creator with time itself, right? The future whispers back to us. Our past informs us. Our present is where we start building some of these things out. Plan efficiently, and don't be scared of playing those. Keep them simple if you want to. Set your intentions clearly. Listen deeply, and also adjust often. It's not a failure. You're just course correcting like anybody sane would do. You have to change your tactics sometimes when things aren't working the way that you intended them to go, or if they're going in a direction that isn't appropriate for where you're trying to go. Let manifestation arise not by force, but from that alignment, that attunement, your presence, and request for the universe that you are already a part of. That's what we do when, well, at least that's what I do when I'm sitting here praying and talking to the darkness and whatnot. That is the alignment, that's the attunement, that's being connected to what it is that I'm doing in my own craft, what I'm trying to navigate in my own life. The full moon that we had this January was also about road mapping and that sort of a thing in an intuitive, sympathetic magic kind of way. Not trying to make a road in some way, but just letting us build a road almost out of all the pounds of chalk that I have here still. And then there was a selection of objects. You can kind of read about this on our Discord recently about how we kind of set this up and did the spell to make a roadmap. And it really revealed some interesting aspects about what the year might hold. There was no foresight put into this. It was just, here's some objects, make a path, build it however you want. And that was really informative for me just to see what came of that. Definitely something I will be returning to next year. And I'll leave you with this, that may your path be clear when it needs to be, and mysterious when mystery is medicine. May your intentions be rooted, and your magic ethical, and navigation to be wise. May your year unfold not as something happening to you, but as something you walk with awareness. I appreciate all of you being here and listening to another sermon for the Church of Witchcraft.